In the majority of sports, the highest honor an athlete can receive for their career is to become a Hall of Famer. It takes an entire lifetime of commitment, perseverance, capability, and let's be serious, a lot of luck to be good enough to be named to a Hall of Fame, especially when it comes to the major sports leagues of the world. But to be named to the Hall of Fame in 2 major sports, that just seems impossible, doesn't it? Well, this is what makes Cal Hubbard so special. To date, he is the only person in history to be enshrined in both the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well as the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the story of how he pulled this off is a wild one. Let's get into it. His early years. Keatsville, Missouri, with a population of 440 as of the 2020 census, seems like an unlikely place for a dual Hall of Famer to start things. But that's exactly where Robert Calvin Hubbard started on October 31st, 1900. He grew up from humble beginnings, the son of a farmer, but one area he was not humble was his physical stature. By 14 years old, he was already quite tall and weighed 200 pounds, making him a natural to play football. But sadly, the Keatsville High School didn't even have a football team, so he had to make do by playing a single year at another high school nearby. While sports were a talent and a passion for him, it wasn't apparent at this point that it would be his career. Indeed, he wanted to attend the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, but he was denied because a physical revealed he had flat feet. And the fact that he was rejected for a physical reason will become really ironic really soon. With West Point off the table, he wanted to attend a college or university that had a football team. But given his commitments to his family and their farm, he had to stay relatively close to home. So he enrolled at the Chillicothe Business School in Chillicothe, Missouri. And while it wasn't exactly a sports powerhouse, it did let him scratch his football itch. But in 1922, he ended up meeting the head coach of the football team at Centenary College in Shreveport, Louisiana, and that's when his athletic career went into overdrive. His football career. By this point, he was listed as being 6 feet 2 inches tall and an absolutely bruising 253 pounds. And you have to remember, this was in an era when being a 6 foot tall football player was considered big. Under head coach Bo McMillan, Hubbard thrived at Centenary College, becoming the school's first All-American player. And when McMillan moved on from Centenary to Geneva College just outside of Pittsburgh, Hubbard went with him, playing a single season there in 1926. He was a college superstar on the defensive side of the ball, specifically playing tackle and end positions. But because of his size and speed, he typically played away from the 7-man front line to take advantage of those physical gifts. And it's for this reason that he is credited with being one of the inventors of the modern linebacker position. How's that for a fun fact? Professional football beckoned him from there, and in 1927 he joined the National Football League, or the NFL. He signed with the New York Giants for $150 a game and was instrumental in them winning the championship that year. He was the anchor of the defense that only allowed 20 points all season, not averaging that per game. 20 points all season. That is insane. But remember how I mentioned Hubbard was born and raised on a farm in a tiny town in rural Missouri? Well, it turned out that this created a real dislike for big cities. He never felt comfortable in New York despite the success he was having on the field. This led him to request a trade away from New York, threatening to retire if he didn't get it. During a 1928 road game in Green Bay, he decided that that was where he wanted to be, as Green Bay had a population of only around 35,000 people at this time. His wish was granted and he joined the Packers in 1929. And despite that change in surroundings, with a new team and a new city, the story on the field was spooky similar. Green Bay won the championship in his first year there in 1929, and again, the defense with Hubbard leading it was incredible. The team only gave up 22 points the entire season, somehow nearly duplicating his impossible feat from New York in 1927, demonstrating just how dominant a force this guy was. He played until 1933 before spending a year in coaching, before returning again, and finally hanging up his cleats in 1936. Coaching was again on the agenda, and he actually served as the head coach of his alma mater, Geneva College, in 1941 and 1942. And when the Pro Football Hall of Fame was created in 1963, Cal Hubbard was included on the list of the initial class of inductees. At the time, he was considered the greatest tackle of all time. And if that was where his story ended, it would be one heck of an athletic career. But it turns out that Hubbard had an encore for us all, a side quest that had begun long before his football days had ended. His baseball career. In his youth, Hubbard had enjoyed being an umpire for local baseball teams in Missouri. It was nothing serious for him, just some pickup games, and his focus was clearly on football, but it was a passion and an interest of his. And even though he was one of the most elite football players of his era, he spent his offseason following this passion. Starting in 1928, sandwiched right between NFL championships in New York and Green Bay, he started umpiring minor league baseball games. And since football was a winter sport and baseball was a summer sport, this was very doable for him. By 1936, with his football playing days officially concluded, he was called up to Major League Baseball to begin officiating at the top level. He was widely respected as an umpire pretty much right away, partially because he was considered fair and courteous, but probably also because he was an enormous human being that no player would ever dare cross. He quickly became one of the best umpires in Major League Baseball, even being selected to umpire the World Series in 1938, just 2 years after entering the league. This was followed by additional appearances in the World Series in 1942, 1946, and 1949, and he was also selected to umpire the All-Star Games in 1939, 1944, and 1949. Interestingly, though, it was his ideas for how umpires should call games that left an even greater impact on the game. Applying his experiences from football to baseball, he devised a system where each umpire had clearly defined duties during each and every play, mirroring the way football referees called a game. He also advocated for and eventually implemented the addition of an extra umpire to MLB umpiring crews, which dramatically improved the accuracy in calling games. This was the foundation on which MLB established new officiating practices in 1952. Sadly, Hubbard's officiating career was cut short by a complete fluke of misfortune. While hunting during the 1951 offseason, a ricochet from a shotgun blast struck him in the eye. Though his eye was saved, the damage was extensive enough to force his retirement from baseball that year. But he was not done contributing, oh no, as he had developed a reputation as both a solid umpire as well as an officiating innovator. So Major League Baseball hired him as an assistant supervisor for league officiating crews, and in 1954 he became the top supervisor, a position he would hold before retiring for good in 1969. And in recognition of his important and enduring contributions to officiating and Major League Baseball as a whole, he was selected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1976. And since that date, he has stood as the only person in both the Football and Baseball Hall of Fame. His later years. In retirement, he still didn't like big cities, and he chose to spend his twilight years in Milan, Missouri, where he had first moved in 1944. He was an avid fisherman and hunter and stayed involved in community affairs, most especially and not surprisingly sports, especially children's sports. In the last few years of his life, he was diagnosed with emphysema before finally dying of cancer in October of 1977, just 1 year after being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. He had numerous awards and honors given to him over the years, but if you ever find yourself in his birthplace of Keatsville, Missouri, stop by the high school to see one of the most important ones. Cal Hubbard Field will give you a taste of where one of the greatest athletic careers of all time began. That's it for today's video, everyone. Hopefully you learned something new and you enjoyed hearing this story as much as I did telling it. Let me know what you think of the video and the legacy of Cal Hubbard in the comments below. And as always, if you have any ideas for new videos, feel free to drop them in there. Thanks as always, and we will be talking again soon.